Welcome to the Storytellers, the radio show and podcast that features those who choose to leave their mark on the world through the art of story. I'm your host, Grace Sammon. I look forward to our time together today. Now, let's meet our storyteller.
Deborah Klée is the award-winning author of page-turning, uplifting fiction. Deborah comes to us today from Essex coast in England, where she loves to walk along the seacoast, where she collects acorns and seashells, but also stories. Deborah, thank you for being with me today at the Storytellers microphone.
Thank you for inviting me, Grace. It's lovely to meet you again online.
It's really a pleasure to have you. I'm so captivated by your themes and how you put such positivity out in the world, including starting with your website, which is Abracadabra. How did you come up with that? I thought it was brilliant.
Well, it's a couple of things. One is when I was very young, there was a song out called Abracadabra, and I had a boyfriend who used to always sing Abracadabra. So it came instantly. But I chose it for my website because I believe that there is magic in storytelling. So it's about the magic of storytelling.
Oh, I do. To sound very British, I think it's brilliant, and it's a memorable website. I'll never forget that your website is Abracadabra. You have very significant themes in your books, and they repeat themselves, but differently in each of them. And we'll talk about your books, but they're very much focused on friendship, community, and emotional courage. Would you start with maybe emotional courage?
Yes. My background, my career, I started out in my early days as an occupational therapist. And then I went into being I worked in health and social care all of my career. And towards the end of my career, working as a management consultant for the last 20 years, because I'm very old now, of course, I was having to write domestic homicide reviews and serious case reviews. And that is when somebody dies as a result of abuse or neglect. So I was listening to families of people who had died tragically and hearing their stories. I was also, through my career, listening to people who were experiencing hardship in terms of facing adversity. And I met so many courageous, I have to say women, because whether it's because the women who would speak on behalf of the family or women were traditionally the ones taking the main weight of the care. But I just met such amazing women who were everyday women doing the jobs, being heroines, really. And being amongst us, you would not know what some people are carrying emotionally. So I was just absolutely inspired by their emotional courage. And I always write happy endings for my protagonists now, because I have had to write reports where the person I'm writing about has died. And my reports had to be their voice. I had to listen to the family, get a sense of the person, and I'd be feeding back to health professionals about what went wrong in the care, the health, the social care, the police, all the different agencies. I'd put the picture together, which is a bit like writing a story, because you get everybody's voice, you hear it all, you put it together, you structure it. And for me, it was always about seeing that the person who's died, their voice was heard and their personality came through. So I felt it as I wrote it, and they obviously never had a happy ending. So one, I find it very hard to read psychological thrillers where women are abused, tortured or killed. I find it very distressing, and I don't want to write about it. For me, that's not entertainment, because I've had to write about real life. So emotional courage reflects and pays homage to the amazing people I have met in my career. And I think their voices are still in my head because they keep coming out in my stories. I'm probably getting towards the end of having to get that all out of me now. It was a process.
But what a fascinating way back into storytelling for you. I had no idea in preparing for today. I knew of your background in healthcare, but the fact that you were writing some horrific endings to individuals indeed focuses on this emotional courage. So where do friendship and community then come into play?
Yes, lighter side. Well, the other part in my career is I've done lots of work with communities. I set up my own social enterprise with my partner, Mark Mordy. I'll give him a get out there. We set up a social enterprise called Vintage, which was about, the initial stood for things, but it's a little way back. But it was about working with people within their communities to build the community that they would want, to make their world better, the place they would rather live. So we would look at all of the things that connected people within a community. And we would go in somewhere where we didn't know anybody, we had no connection, and we would walk the streets and we'd talk to people. And we would find out who are the key people within this community that hold it together. And it's not the people that you think it would be. It's not necessarily, it's not the politician. It's not necessarily the people, faith leaders. It will be, in one area, it was the man in the corner shop. In another, it was the fish and chip van, which did its rounds. There are key people. If you think about your community, you'll think about people that you think, well, yes, these are the people that we think of, that we go to, who know everybody, what's happening and hold things together. So you get your key person, and then you get all the organisations. So we would find out, they go to the Scouts and these schools and this club and the knitting group and the dog walkers. There's all the different groups in the community. And all those communities, they're all, when you start to link them, it's like building a web, a spider web. One community could offer something, another one would need something. One person has something to offer, another person needs it. So you build up the community. And I just became absolutely fascinated by communities, because wherever you go, there is always a community. Sometimes it's hidden. For example, in my book, The Borrowed Boy, I talk about hidden communities, some more hidden than others. But everywhere you go, there's a community, and it's completely different and unique for that area. And to go in and to discover that community, for me, is like unwrapping a gift. So, yeah, I feel passionately about community.
What compelled you to do that community organizing work, if you will?
Because I guess it was because I always, through my career, was talking to people and finding that they had things that they wanted in their life. And I could always say there were things that they could offer. I could always see people's strengths and the gifts they had to give. And then I could see how I wanted to connect people. Say, well, you need this, I want this, and that person's got that. And I would see this magic happening. So I was kind of facilitating it. I mean, my background was an occupational therapist, so I was kind of facilitating that in my work. And I got to a point in my career where I had connections with people who could really make things happen, because I'd got quite a long way in my career. And I could also talk to people on the ground. And I wanted to use my power, if you like, and my knowledge and my skills to do good, to help make change and difference for people on the ground, but for them to be able to do it for themselves. So I was really looking at what I had to give and contributing that, because we all have something to give. And the person who was the most disabled or socially deprived, who thought they had nothing, always had something to give. And it's when we give something, we feel valued and appreciated. So I just loved seeing people come to life when they saw that they had something of value to offer.
Oh, that perspective alone is a gift. So last but not least in your trilogy of friendship, community, and emotional courage, let's talk about friendship.
Friendship, just because I love my friends. I think just friends are so precious, aren't they? Especially female friends. I've got friends. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I met up with my old school friends who we met each other in when we were. Well, I should say 1972. We've known each other for all those years, and we all got together and stayed together in a house. And I thought, what good choices I made then. So I just love my girlfriends. I love my friends. So friendship is part of my life.
Well, especially as we age, I think the power of friendship, particularly female friendships, is so incredibly formative in how we live our day-to-day lives. You obviously had a very busy career, and you have not slowed down very much in your retirement. I look at the body of your work. We'll talk about your books in just a moment. But you have a podcast, you do a Castaway Books, you do a blog. Why do you do all you do?
Oh, I drive myself too hard. I drive myself crazy. I don't know why I do all I do. I guess because it's all about marketing, because I want to get out and to meet people, to introduce them to my books and wonderful opportunities like this. But it's more than that, because I always say to people, marketing isn't about saying, buy my books, buy my books. For me, it's about connecting with your readers. It's listening to them. It's finding them. It's hearing what they want to read and making connections on an emotional level. So I think all the things I do, it's about connecting with other writers who in turn are readers. I guess networking is just very, very important to me, because you can't achieve anything on your own. You only can do it together. And I've met so many amazing people through my podcasts, through my Friday Salon, which is a weekly tweet chat that's now been going over 3 years. So we have this every Friday where we chat. We've just started something else where we have a Zoom. We all get together and have a writing hour. So we meet each other on Zoom. We chat and support each other. Then we write for an hour and then we come back again. So I guess all the things I do are about networking, and it's about the real making connections with people who initially intended to attract readers to make the connection. But I love people, and I love making the connections. And the more I do, the more it grows. And yeah, I mean, as well as all of that, I do lots of in-person events locally as well. So I'm always meeting people.
Well, you are a quintessential networker. And your podcast, you really focus on the psychological, the emotional, and the spiritual. How did you pick that as your focus?
Because that's part of me, and it always has been. But mostly, I mean, I was doing this because it's about the inner journey of the creative. And now this really came about that I wanted to share this because when I was trying to get published and I had my book, The Borrowed Boy, my debut, I had a top literary agent, who was excited about my book, was putting it to the top 5, and was so excited about this, and I've in my head, it was all about to happen, and then it came crashing down when it didn't happen for me, and then I had to find another agent. And even before that happened, at the beginning of that year, when the book was going out to publishers, I knew that I needed something to keep me grounded and sane throughout that process, because it's an emotional roller coaster, we all know. And I really, really feel for authors, writers who are just experiencing that, because you really need to have some faith, some belief, to hold you, grounded and to help you through that process, emotional. So at that time, I thought, yes, I need something to ground me. It was coming up to Easter, it was Lent, and I thought, I'm going to meditate every day in the lead up to Lent, because meditation is going to help me through this difficult year, challenging year. And I meditated every day for 40 days, and then for a year, and then for 2 years, then for 3 years. So I was meditating every day. And around that time, I started a blog, and my blog was really, as many blogs are, me going through my emotions and how I was feeling, and trying to put it into words. And I found that lots of people resonated with people, and I got lots of people following that blog and I got lovely messages how it's making real difference for them. And I did that for a fair while, and then I ran out of things that I wanted to say, and I wanted to talk to other people to hear about their emotional, psychological, spiritual journey of being a writer, which is where the Mindful Writer came from. And I feel that I still listen to those podcasts, because I find them uplifting, motivating, inspiring. And I think writers need that. All creatives need that, because it's an incredibly emotional journey. And we're always going through it every stage we're at. Even my friend, who's a best-selling Times author, sold millions of copies, she too goes through these emotional traumas, because you put your heart and soul into it, and it's it's a very emotional time. So I think having something to ground you and keep you uplifted and positive is really important.
And that's exactly what your books do. The Borrowed Boy, Just Be, Forever Cruise, The Last Act. Amazing. First of all, breadth of work. So do you want to run us through those? Because each of them is different. You've already done the spoiler. Yes, there's a happy ending. But
Always.
There's nothing wrong with a happy ending. So why don't you just walk us through, first of all, The Borrowed Boy, your debut?
Okay. Well, I happen to have one here to show you my beautiful covers.
Yes.
Like designed by Asia Blue, who's from New York, who's another person I met on the internet. So The Borrowed Boy was set in Jaywick Sands. And this story came to me because I had three different things I thought I wanted to write a story about. One was I saw a small child get separated from his mum on the tube, and it was a terrifying moment. We all held our breath, but she grabbed her child and pulled him off the tube. And I thought, phew. And I thought, what would happen if they had got separated? So I had that one in my mind. And then there's a place near us called Jaywick Sands, which is an unusual area because it was, years and years ago, just after the Second World War, I think it probably was, there was a scheme to create places where families could go and have holidays. And people were allowed to build holiday homes from anything. There was no planning restrictions. You could build it from whatever you wanted to. And Ford's had a factory near us in the East End of London. So lots of Ford workers would use packing boxes and things to build these sort of chalets and houses. So it was kind of, I called it in my thing, which sounds a bit rude, but the people there didn't actually mind it. A shanty town of displaced Londoners is how I described it. So at that time, in its heyday, it was a wonderful holiday resort. But then as time went on, all these other places around the country all closed down because they weren't working, but not Jaywick Sands. The people there were such a strong community, they wouldn't get rid of their chalets. And so it became a really run-down area. So I was riding my bike down there and people coming out and looking at me, and it felt like, you could sort of see these sort of the tumbleweed, in the street, and the people all were watching, and it just felt like you are not welcome here. But I know from people that have been moved out to social housing, they say they hated leaving Jaywick because that place was such a tight community, such a happy place to live. They hated leaving it. Anyway, I wrote about the books. It's such a unique area. So I set this story about this lady who picks up this boy who's separated from his mum on the tube and takes him to Jaywick Sands. And it's not the way it remembered when she was young and she went there for holidays. But when I was reading this out at a live reading in Jaywick in a pub, my husband said, "You can't read it out there." He's thinking they'll lynch you. They can't read that in Jaywick. I was brave because I loved that community and I wrote about it with kindness. When I was reading out my chapter, the barmaid was watching me, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, maybe I shouldn't read this. And, when I finished it, 3 people were all saying, can I buy it? Can I buy it? But there wasn't that thing that really, really moved me was the barmaid came to me and she held my hand and she said, "I've lived in Jaywick all of my life and you've described the Jaywick that I know, and thank you." So I was so moved by that. I think that made me feel more validated than anything to have a local person say, "You've captured my community." So,
and that's what we want. So we only have a very few minutes left. Just Be Forever Cruise is the last act, your latest book, I think. Let's go there.
I should tell you very quickly about the last act. The last act, that was the very first book I ever wrote when I didn't even know I could write a novel. And it started because the tutor said, "Write a story of 5,000 words," and I did. And then she said, "Actually, that could be a novel." So I wrote that as a novel, but it didn't get published. I got an agent who wanted me to publish it, but when she sent a review and resubmit, I thought, oh, that means it's rubbish. I'll write another book. So 10 years later or something, I finally thought, no, this book's got to come out and be published. So I completely reworked it, but it shows how far I've come from when I started. So it's special to me.
Oh, indeed. And your other books, one is about Just Be is about really how we all have to adapt. Is that?
Yes, that one's about a woman who brings in a homeless man to live in her home, and she works in Harrods and he's on the street, and it's about the relationship between them. And yes, it's interesting because you think that he's the more disadvantaged than her, but actually it's more the other way around.
Deborah Klée, I am so happy that you joined me here and I got to tell part of your story on the Storytellers microphone. Thank you for being with me.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure, Grace.
This has been a copyrighted episode of The Storytellers with Grace Sammon and Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Deborah Klée, thank you for being with me.
Thank you.
That concludes this episode of The Storytellers. I'm so glad you could be part of the story today. I hope you share the stories, tell your own, and come back for another episode, because when our stories are told, everything changes. I'm Grace Sammon.